Hey everyone, welcome to July. I've got the market update for Calgary detached houses for the month of June up on my screen. So let's just dive right in and show you what happened in June. You can tell that it's still a seller's market, but you can see that things are slowing. They're a little slower in June than they were in May. May was a little slower than they were in April. I don't know all the reasons why that's happening, but I have my own personal reasons why I think it is. One of them is just the fact that restrictions are being lifted. Everybody was cooped up for so long with this pandemic. I think real estate is just taking a little bit more of a back seat just because people are able to travel and do things. And we might see that the summer could be a little slower, whereas normally the summer is quite busy. And even though our economic environment is getting better in Alberta, I think that we'll be just fine coming into the fall. I just think we're going to see a little bit of a slower down in the summer months, just especially from what I'm seeing here. That being said, it's still really good. And 55.78% of the listings listed selling is a good number. And even though, that's almost 45% of the houses listed didn't sell, that might look like, hey, that's not so good after all. But really 55.78% of the listings selling is really a good number. But it just goes to show, if you want to sell, you need to be realistic. And you need to still pay attention to getting your house ready for sale and have some strong marketing, which I'll touch on in just a moment as well. Our benchmark price, $537,200. So prices have still continued to rise, even though that the overall market seems to be slowing just a little bit. And that's good. You can see we're up 13.14% year over year in prices. That really is an unprecedented rise in pricing for 1 year for Calgary. That really shows you the strength of the market. It's really good to see that when you consider how many years we were seeing price drops. If you take a look all the way from 2014, and you can see how our market has just been like a seesaw on pricing. And it's so good to see that we're bouncing back. In fact, we've surpassed the 2014 price levels. So this is really good news for Calgary. 1,819 sales out of 3,261. So you can see we had 1,911 sales in May. So we softened in June. And usually June would be busier than May. But, in a normal year, June would be busier than March. Here we had March as so far the strongest year of 2021. This may turn out to be, the strongest month of 2021 could be March. That's very unusual. Usually June is the strongest month of the year. So not a normal year. Average time on the market it takes to sell is 27 days. So if you're on the market and you haven't sold by now, there's got to be a reason for that. It could be the price. It could be some marketing. Could be the right buyer hasn't come in. But if everything is lined up properly, you should have no problem selling your house within a month. Now, let's take a look at market distribution. And you can see this has really changed. They're for a detached property under $300,000 in Calgary is becoming non-existent. And even houses under $400,000 is now only 15% of the market. That was a very, very different percentage a couple of years ago. There were a lot of houses under $400,000. Now it's getting extremely scarce. So you can see those people who were selling here are now here in the 400 to 500 because the market went up 13% on average. And I'll tell you, in some sections of the market, it's even been higher than 13%, especially in the lower priced real estate, because there's been a really high demand for lower priced real estate. So many first-time home buyers want to get into the market. 29% of all the sales are between 400,000 and 500,000. And then almost, 23.39% are between 500,000 and 600,000. So it's raising the market. All of these sectors of the market, as you go up in price, are increasing. And again, the one I always like to look at is the 1 million to 1.5 million. In the heyday of 2007, that was up 5%. We're at 4.21%. So there's been a lot of luxury real estate that has moved. And I've been quite surprised, being that I run a brokerage and I can see all of the sales in the office. I've been amazed at how many properties we've moved. Even myself personally this year, I've moved more luxury property than I ever have in my career. And I'll tell you what else has been very interesting. I can't believe how many has been all cash, not even a mortgage required. So there's money out there, and it's been showing up. And I've also been really impressed with the luxury rural market. It's amazing how much land has been sold, how many acreages have been selling. So this is pretty indicative of a market that's rebounding. Okay, let's take a look at the attached properties that are not condos. 41.05% absorption rate. You can see the difference, again, going back to March, where we peaked. 60% of the properties listed were selling. We've dropped now to 41.05%. Definitely some softening there. Our benchmark price at $427,000 is still good. I mean, at least the prices are for the houses or the attached properties that have been selling are still rising a little bit in price. So it means that that those luxury attached properties in the inner city are still moving, which is good to see. And you can see our jump from 2020, to 2021, just how much of a jump we've made in price points. We've gone up 10.68% year over year on our average sale price or benchmark price for attached properties. It's pretty significant. 243 out of 592 have sold. Even though it's not as good as March, not as good as April, and not as good as May, that's still a pretty good number. But as I mentioned before, we're getting into more of a normal market again. The market's taking a little bit of a breather. It's not as hot as it was, and it may not finish as hot as it was. So it means you have to be a little bit more careful on what you do to sell your property. It means your pricing especially has to be bang on, or you're not going to move the property. 37 days on market, that's still pretty healthy when you consider a year ago it was 60 days to sell a property. So that's the benchmark. If you haven't sold your property in 37 days, you need to take a good look as to why that's happening. All right, let's take a look at market distribution. Same kind of a picture as the detached, whereas the under 300,000 has really dropped. I mean, we're now only 11.7% of the properties that have sold are in that price range. The bulk of them, just like the detached market, has come into the $300,000 to $400,000 range. And there are a lot of really nice attached properties that don't have condo fees in this price range, in some good locations within the city. And it's a really good option for people to consider. Now, you can see it just drops off a cliff when you go to 400 to 500 because, once you get to 400 to 500 or 400 to 600, most people are going to be looking at detached in that price range. But when you move to the 600 to 800,000, you're going into the inner city. And the inner city is where you're going to see a lot more of those attached properties. And you can see that pretty healthy market, almost 12% respectively between both price points. And even that 900 to a million seems to be moving up. I mean, 2.91% of the market. So, 41 properties have sold in that price range. So that's also looking up and still pretty healthy. As I said earlier, I think it's going to be a little slower this summer. Just expect that. I think people are going to take a break from the market, but there'll still be some sales. Don't get me wrong. I think July and August will still look pretty good all in all. All right, let's take a look at the row houses. The row houses are attached by 4 or more, and they usually, almost in every case, have condo fees. And you can see the absorption rate has dropped down to 37.33% for this type of a product. That's pretty consistent. I mean, if you look at March, it was 43.67%. For whatever reason, people just don't like condo fees, or if they can avoid them, they prefer to avoid them, even though I'll be the first to say there's some value in those condo fees if you really take a look and break them down what you're getting. But the market speaks, and you can see the bulk of people, their first choice in Calgary would be to have a property without condo fees, and it's very evident in these stats. The benchmark price is $299,300, and that's still a healthy increase year over year from what we've seen. That's up 9.03%. If we move down to the hard numbers, it's 411 out of 1,101 that have sold. Like I said, it's pretty consistent because, you know, even in the month of March, 383, April was 424. So we're just hovering in those low 400s for the demand. So pretty stable, healthy market, and in a reasonably good demand. 39 days on the market in order to sell one. And here's our market distribution, and you can see what I'm talking about. If it's under $300,000, there's a lot of people that like to get into these row houses because if that is your budget, it's the next best thing than going into a house. If you only can really afford to be under $300,000, or that's just where you are comfortable buying, you're going to probably have a condo fee. But you know, you get a small backyard, and usually these are 2 stories, so they're like being in an attached house for the most part. But you can see that's where the market generally is. 40% of all the sales are under $300,000. And then the bulk of them are under $400,000, but it just drops right off if you go higher than that, because for Calgary, if you're going to have a property, that's going to be $400,000 plus, there's a lot of choices that don't involve getting a condo fee. So that's why this market is not that strong when you go past $400,000. And that's something to think about if you're going to invest in real estate. Okay, last but not least are apartment condos. And same sort of picture here as the townhouse condos or row houses. 22.51% absorption rate. We haven't even really hit the balanced market yet. Pretty consistent. When you consider March being the best month of the year, we're relatively the same as March. We've been hovering around the same, since March, but a little bit better than the month of May for reasons I don't fully understand. The benchmark price, $253,000. So we're up 5% year over year. It's really good for the condo market just to see that the prices are holding and slightly rising, despite the fact that we have a lot of inventory in Calgary and there's more inventory coming. I don't know where we're going to put all these people that want to live in condos, but at least we're seeing that there is a pretty good demand for them. Reasonably speaking, 22% is certainly a whole lot better than it was when at 1 month in 2020 during the pandemic, we were like under 9% absorption rate. That was horrific. 442 out of 1,964 have sold. So up slightly from May, still down slightly from April, up slightly from March. So the demand has been staying fairly constant. I think you're going to really still have to focus really hard on being competitive on your pricing when it comes to selling a condo in this market, because again, there's still a pretty good amount of competition when you think of 1,964. If you want to be one of these 442, you're going to have to pay attention to all of the moving parts of selling a condo. 55 days on the market is what it should take to sell. That's your gauge. And you can see here, the bulk of the condos sell for under $300,000. This is where your market is. And if you really think about it, you've got a lot of first-time buyers that want to be here. You have some people who are downsizing that want to be here. The people who are downsizing usually they want to have a condo that's, sell the house, put a lot of the money in the bank from the house, and then of course get into a cheaper condo. And first-time buyers, this is their budget. That's why there's just a cliff that drops right off to under $400,000, and there's just is not a very big market for anything over $400,000. So you have to really think about that too if you're going to be a condo investor. I know they've announced that they're going to start building these luxury condos out of some of the vacant buildings downtown. And when I look at stats like this, I would not want to be the developer that is going to take that on. I think it's a risky venture. I think the condo market is really here. We're primarily, a row house, detached, attached type of a town. And we just don't have, the market like Vancouver and Toronto does for condos downtown. So I'm not so sure that's the way to go myself, just looking at these stats. But that being said, at least there still is a market right now, and there probably will continue to be a decent market, especially if you're under $400,000. Hopefully that information is helpful. As always, just reach out to me if you have any questions on these stats that I just showed you. And if you do have a property that you're considering selling and you want to take a good look at what's happening in your particular community, even if you're not selling till next year, I don't care what your timeline is, I will be happy to show you the stats for your particular community and do a professional market analysis for your house. And that always includes tips on how you can increase the value of your home. There are some things that you can do. I've had some great success with doing a few minor renovations with people and then putting it on the market and actually getting a great return for those minor renovations. We're doing a few right now, and it works extremely well. A lot of times people just don't have the resources or the know-how in order to do some of that stuff. I have a full team that I work with that makes this happen. So just reach out to me and I will be glad to give you some guidance on that. All the best. Have a wonderful July, and we'll see you in August.